there's kind of like three main principles. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of them, but the first one's Pareto's law, that 80-20 rule, right? 80% of results come from 20% of the inputs. And so we spend a lot of time analyzing and reviewing and figuring out like what actions are producing the most results, doing more of those things and cutting the rest of it out. The second one is Parkinson's law. Things will take as long as you let them take. And so creating deadlines, not too stressful of deadlines, obviously, but creating deadlines that forces us to get things done in the right amount of time. And then the last one is just prioritization. Once you understand what's producing the results and how to do those things effectively and efficiently, we prioritize, because you just don't have enough time in the day to do everything. And so we focus on those things that are most important and prioritize and let everything else fall by the wayside.
Hey, I'm Armando Leduc, producer, film actor, and owner of Leduc Entertainment. I have chosen a life off the beaten path and wanted to find others that are doing the same. Spaghetti on the Wall is a show based on all of the years that I've thrown spaghetti on the wall and nurtured what's stuck. We will share fun stories, ideas, tips, tricks, and more. Welcome to Spaghetti on the Wall. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on when you are consuming this podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, Spaghetti on the Wall, back with another one. Chris Guymon is in the house. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Did I say it right, Guymon?
Yeah.
I like it. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm doing really good. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here, man. So we're going to pop right in. But before we do, give me some background, because you're an attorney and you started getting into consulting because you became so successful. And now you're helping other attorneys with their time management skills. And so give us a little bit about your backstory.
Yeah, I started my own law firm straight out of school. I had an offer for a big law, but they wanted me to work 60 to 80 hours a week. And I just had a baby. And I was like, you know what? Like, I can't be away from my wife and kid that much. So I started my own firm right out of school, made a fraction of what I could have made that first year. And it was really that first year struggling through it that I realized that law school didn't teach me anything about running a business. So I really jumped into learning about the business side of law and grew my practice to what I would consider successful. It gave me the time, money, and energy that I needed to do the things that I love. And that's when I started about 3 years ago, coaching other people to do the same, really focusing a lot more on that quality of life side of things, which requires money for sure, but it also requires having time and energy and balancing those three things so that you can do what you love to do.
So funny you're bringing this up, because last week I was talking to Gino Wickman. Do you know who that is?
I don't.
He wrote the book Traction. He created EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system.
Yeah, I have heard of that.
And so he just come up with a new book. It's called Shine, and it's basically, how to sort of live your authentic self and grow internally as you are growing externally, and where you are in terms of in your business. And it was a really interesting conversation, because we often are just so focused on the movement and the goals and scaling and making money, and it's just that going 120 miles an hour. And I'm, for a long time I was in the same boat. But
yeah,
and to your point, like when you're sort of slowing down and you have more of the time, it's those moments that you can actually like create better systems, and you're working better because you're not inundated, and that by letting go, you're going forward. It's just, it's so counterintuitive, because you just think you just got to like force it and just keep working and you're going to make it. But that isn't necessarily the case, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's crazy. I actually had a friend just reach out to me this morning. And she joined my program. She took all the advice about making money, but didn't take any advice about saving her time. And she did grow quite a bit. But at the cost of her health, she actually just had a stroke. So she hadn't talked, I hadn't talked to her in a couple of weeks, and she reached out to me today saying, hey, I had a stroke 2 weeks ago. Just from the stress of not doing it. And it was interesting, because she's like, I should have taken the advice on those things back then. And I want to do it now. I can't let something like this happen to me again. She's a mom with, a couple of kids at home, and the primary breadwinner as well. And we forget sometimes chasing those goals, those types of things, they're exciting, they're fun, but there's a lot more to life than just the financial side.
Yeah, especially attorneys,
Yeah.
because I work with a lot of attorneys, and everybody's just so money focused. Because it's such it's so competitive,
Yeah.
right? In your industry, it's so competitive, and so everybody's just like, I gotta grind, I gotta grind, I gotta grind, and it's the slowing down that really is that makes a difference. Also, I think strategy, right? Which is why having someone that has been there before that can guide you along and make sure that you're avoiding pitfalls is key. So talk to me about, what are the things that you tell them, and you know and how do you get them, scaling and saving their time?
Yeah, you bet. And I was very intentional with the naming of the program that it was Time Freedom Lawyers because of this exact thing that we've been talking about. I felt so strongly that there's so much material out there on making money and those types of things, but without your time, a lot of that's not worth it. But as you also said, you kind of got to go slow to go fast sometimes. And by slowing down and regaining control of your time, it also gives you the opportunity to grow. So time is always going to be one of the biggest things that I talk about. And there's kind of like three main principles. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of them, but the first one's Pareto's law, that 80-20 rule, right? 80% of results come from 20% of the inputs. And so we spend a lot of time analyzing and reviewing and figuring out like what actions are producing the most results, doing more of those things and cutting the rest of it out. The second one is Parkinson's law. Things will take as long as you let them take. And so creating deadlines, not too stressful of deadlines, obviously, but creating deadlines that forces us to get things done in the right amount of time. And then the last one is just prioritization. Once you understand what's producing the results and how to do those things effectively and efficiently, we prioritize because you just don't have enough time in the day to do everything. And so we focus on those things that are most important and prioritize and let everything else fall by the wayside.
And so how are you finding that out for someone?
Yeah. Um, for me, the hardest thing that I had to realize was that in order to know where you want to go, uh, or in order to know what to do, you have to know where you want to go, right? There's that story in Alice in Wonderland where she walks up to the cat and she's like, "Which road do I take?" He says, "Where do you want to go?" And she says, "I don't know." And he's like, "Well, then it doesn't really matter which road you take." And so, a lot of what I do starts with being super clear on people's goals, because depending on what stage you're at in life, sometimes it may be money that's most important. Sometimes it's time. Like I coach a mom who's homeschooling her 5 kids. Her goals are very different than one of my other clients who his wife is a stay-at-home mom taking care of the kids, and he's really focused on generating income. So we get super clear on those goals first. And one of the funny things is we often think we know what we want, and we often don't. About 75% of the people who join my program, they change their goals in the first 4 weeks. And so they list it down, and they've been trained to think that they want certain things. But once we get super clear on our goals and then we create a plan to achieve those goals and start working towards that plan, sometimes it's really telling that we don't actually want what we said we wanted. And so that's the first step, getting super clear on your goals and then creating that plan. We try to break down your goals into bite-sized chunks. I'm not a big fan of like even yearly goals or 5-year goals. I usually break down goals into like 12 weeks. Like, what's something that I can get done in the next 12 weeks? That seems to be long enough that you can see like a big enough change, but it's short enough that you can't slack off in the middle. And then we just start working on it, right? We identify, if I need to make, if I want to make $12,000 and it's $1,000 per client, then I need 12 clients, and that's one a week. I'm just making easy math here, and so each week we look and see like how many consultations did we do, how many things did we do to get those clients, and I always want to see what inputs people are doing, and are they producing the results. Often we'll make a plan and we'll say like, okay, I'm going to talk to 10 people a day, and then at the end of the week they only talked to 20 people and instead of 50. And then they're like, man, I only got 2/5 the results that I thought I was going to get. And it's not because your plan didn't work. It's because you didn't work the plan. So I need to know, one, did you work the plan? And did the plan work? And if you didn't work the plan, my favorite thing is to sit down and ask ourselves why. Because more often than not, it's either you didn't want what you said you wanted, or you set it up in such a way that it didn't fit you. Like that same mom of 5 kids, she's set to do her marketing stuff at 8:30 at night. her kids were in bed, and she's like, okay, from 8:30 to 10:30, I'm going to do this marketing. Well, anybody who has kids knows that when you put your kids to bed, like that's the one time of day you actually get to yourself. And not surprisingly, she didn't want to spend it marketing. She wanted to spend it with her husband. And so we set that goal. And then 2 weeks later, we came back. And of the 10 times that she was supposed to do it, she had done it 3. And she did get about 3/10 of the results that she was looking for. So we knew that it was going to work. It just wasn't going to work at 8:30 at night. And so we had to move things around and have an honest conversation about what she wanted to do with her nights. And then the next 2 weeks, she did it 9 out of 10 times. We moved it to the middle of the day when her kids were reading. So it was still a good time for them. Like they're reading, it's quiet in the house, but it was a time when her brain was active. And sure enough, she did it 9 out of 10 times and got 90% of the results she wanted. So really just trying to figure it out, right? Like, is it your plan that's not working? Are you not working your plan? If so, why? I call it review, revise, repeat. Just review what you're doing, revise the things that aren't working, and repeat the things that are.
I love that. I had Joey Coleman on the podcast. He wrote a book called Never Lose a Customer Again.
Yeah.
And he does a thing called stop, start, continue.
Yeah.
And he says, in his meetings, he does, okay, what are 2 things that we can start right now? What are 2 things that we need to stop right now? And then what are 3 things that we need to continue or double down on?
Yeah.
And I love that concept, right? Because it's like, it's simple, but simple is not always easy, right?
Absolutely.
It's easy to be just messy as just a person in business. Cause like you're doing a bunch of things and it's just like, where are you going? What are you doing? There's no real clear picture. I'll tell you, when we finally put our processes and procedures together and there were actual KPIs based on like jobs and what people were doing, not only did they become happier, but like we were also, reaping the rewards, right? Because like now we could measure stuff that we didn't have before. And that was just, but getting clear and trimming the fat and making sure that we're like getting down to like the nitty gritty of what is important, to your point, right? The 80-20 rule. It's like, that is extremely difficult. And so talk to me about how you take somebody through that process to like really start trimming the fat, right? Because you're like a butcher, right? You're in there and you're like,
yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up the KPIs, because I tell people it's just like keeping score when you're playing a game, right? It's one thing to play. Like I was playing basketball this morning with some buddies and it got pretty heated because it was a close game and you have to win by 4. And we all knew what it took to win, and it was close, and we're back and forth and arguing and having a good time. And but that competitiveness, the hard work that we put into it came because we were keeping score. And that's what the KPIs do, is you identify those key performance indicators, those things that produce results, and then you keep score to help your team understand when they're winning. And then you can celebrate their wins when they hit their KPIs. That's very much part of it, is celebrating their wins and helping them know that they won by doing that. And the results will come, right? If they're doing the right things over and over again, it'll average out. The results will come. Some weeks they'll make more than others. And, like this morning, I shot 66% from 3, which is super awesome. I wish I could do that every day. Like 2 days ago, I think I shot like 20% from 3, so do the right things. You practice. Some days you're going to hit a lot. Some days you're miss them. But if you do the right things over and over again, you'll get the results. So how I do that, some of the stuff is pretty basic. I'm going to be honest, especially with law firms and attorneys. The most basic stuff is the most important. And so I like to talk about, like, one is, do we have enough clients? And if they have enough clients, then the next step is, are we getting paid for that work? You would think that's silly. And why would I even need to talk about this? But the average attorney only collects 2.1 hours a day worth of work. And so for every 8 hours that they work, they get paid for 2.1 hours, 25%. Yeah, exactly.
That's not much.
No, it's not. And so for a lot of attorneys, as I jump in there, I'm trying to identify what are they doing during the day. Like sometimes it's emails and other things. Sometimes they're not getting paid for the work. The average attorney is billing about 3.7 hours for every 8 hours that they work, and they're only getting paid for 2.1 of them. And so I'm trying to figure out like why. What is that? How I've ended up doing this for so many attorneys is I will make them every day, the first 4 hours they work on the business. So they're working on marketing, advertising, creating systems, those types of things. And then the second half of the day, they're working in the business. And I restrict them and say, you're only allowed to work on the cases that have already paid you in advance. So they have money in trust, and um, and then they work on those cases. And because they batch the time together, it's really easy at the end of the 4 hour block to make sure that they've billed for all 4 hours. And because it's people who have already paid for the services, their collection rates are really high. And so I had this reputation when I first started practicing of helping people double their income in 30 days. And that's all I was doing. As I noticed that the average attorney billed 2.1 hours. And if I could get them to bill 4 hours a day on money in trust, they'd collect 4 and they'd double their income. And so, I mean, I wish I could say I'm like magic and secretive and have these crazy things, but it's often that simple. And if they don't have enough work to do 4 hours a day, then we start working on the clientele stuff, and we set up some KPIs to generate clients that way. But for most attorneys, it really is just managing their calendar and being super clear on when they're working on their business and when they're working in their business.
Man, that is, I mean, we nail it on the head every time, because you really are talking about simplifying, and like this thing that's just like amorphous, right? Like it's not it can't, there's so many facets to it, and personalities and things moving, and it's like a machine, but it's a gooey machine, right? Like it's
Yeah.
not, so it's just like, oh, this side's moving, oh, you got to move over here, and it's constantly doing that. So talk to me about why it's so important to have somebody like yourself, in somebody's corner, and like actually forcing and creating accountability with the business owner.
Attorneys will often say like that they would never represent themselves in court, and you guys, and it doesn't matter if you're a lawyer or not in this point, right? Like you would never represent yourself in court. Even attorneys who are good at their practice area, like if I was getting divorced, I still wouldn't represent myself because you're biased, right? You have your business is your baby, and you want to, some things may have brought you success when you were starting out that are actually hindering you from growing, and you just can't see it objectively. Where someone like me, when I come in, I don't care if that was what got you from zero to $5,000 a month. That skill that got you there may be what's stopping you from getting to $50,000 a month. And so I can come in and see things with objective eyes. And then, I mean, the biggest part, I mean, I don't know if I'm the right coach for certain people. Like sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. What I tell people to look for when they're looking for a business coach is, have they done what you want to do? And have they helped other people do the same? We always want to make sure that they've done what you want to do. There's a lot of people who are selling like other products or hypothetical information. If they haven't done what you want to do, then their material is hypothetical at best. But we also want to make sure that they've helped other people do the same, because sometimes people get lucky. Like you don't want to be taking advice from the lottery winner who says, "Hey, as long as you spend $100 every single week on the lottery, and you just believe you're going to win, that sooner or later you'll win the lottery." Like we all know that's not true. The statistics don't match. Just because they won doesn't mean that you will. And so we want to make sure that the systems that they use to get their success are repeatable. And so make sure that they've helped other people do the same. If you find someone who's done what you want to do and they've helped other people do the same, the likelihood of you succeeding is pretty high. And that's what I've seen in my program. Over half of the people who are in my program generate over $500,000 a year. And that's repeatable. I know if it worked for me and it's worked for that many other people, I know that if you work the plan, it'll work. But something like that, there's a lot of snake oil salesmen out there. So make sure that they can back up what they say, back up what they promise.
To that point, how do you know when you need to pull the plug? How do you know, like, when you're working a strategy, and luckily, you've been there, right? And when you tell somebody what they should be doing, it's probably because you've already been there, you've tried it out, there was a lot of trial and error, and you're like, and these are the results, right? But
yeah,
for a strategy that like hasn't necessarily been worked to the point where we know it's like, yeah, this is a really good strategy, and it's probably going to, result in a lot of good results.
Yeah.
At what point do you pull the plug and go, nah, that's not, this isn't really working out the way we want it to, but you don't want to, like, where's that point? Because you want to do it long enough to make sure that it works, because you want to stop short of it, but then you don't want to continue on, where you're just like, yo, this is just really not working. Why are we continuing to do this?
Yeah. Um, I think one of the most important parts is first making sure you understand like the KPIs, like what are you actually doing, right? Um, and until people can clearly track the actions, I'm not going to analyze whether something works or not, because sometimes they work really hard and it works, and sometimes they don't. I have a client who I helped her set up a webinar. She worked really hard. We got her presentation really good, but she only did like a fraction of the advertising. And like 3 people showed up to the webinar. None of them I hired her. She's like, man, that didn't work. I'm like, no, like I could sit back and say the fact that only 3 people showed up, there was some issues in her marketing. And sure enough, as we worked through it, we could identify what the issues in her marketing were. And so it wasn't that webinars don't work, it's that she didn't work webinars. And so we then did it another time, and I really helped her, kind of held her hand a little bit to make sure that she did all of the messaging up to it. The next time she did it, she had 30 people show up. And not surprisingly, she had like 4 or 5 clients out of that. Her presentation was pretty good. And so, that in that case, it worked, So at the very first time though, is making sure you're super clear on those KPIs. What actions are being taken and what are the results? Once you can track the actions, then it's just a question of if the results are worth it. I did a Google advertising campaign the other day, and I could see that I spent $5,000 on ads and I got one $5,000 client out of it. So it worked. I broke even, but then I had to work on a divorce for 3 months just to break even. That wasn't a good enough ROI, but that's what you're looking for, right? Is once you know the actions you're putting in, what are you getting out? And just, is it a good enough return on investment of your time or your money? And if it is, you keep doing it. If it's not, you don't. But you can't truly have that analysis until you know what the inputs are actually being put in.
So you think webinars work for attorneys?
For some practice areas, they're really good. Other practice areas, they're not. This was an estate planning practice. And so I find, like, I break law into kind of 2 categories. One is like injury prevention, and the other one is injury recovery. So like estate planning, if someone gets a will and a trust or a business contract, something like that, that's really injury prevention. If you can get in early and do a trust, that $1,000 or $2,000 trust can save you $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 on the back end in probate. The problem with that is they're not very urgent. And so you kind of have to do webinars, those types of things. You kind of build a list and you nurture that list like a coach would or someone else. Where injury prevention, like criminal or injury recovery, criminal law, personal injury, family law, no one's going to follow a divorce attorney while they're happily married, right? That's a really good sign to not continue to be happily married. And so trying to build a list with a family law firm is really hard. And you're going to get a lot of unsubscribes and that kind of stuff. Those types of people I've found, pay-per-click and Google reviews, honestly, is one of the most important parts. Getting really good reviews, testimonials, those types of things. Those are going to be a lot more effective for those people, because when somebody has the problem, they're going to start searching for it, and you need to be in front of them multiple times, usually 3 to 5 times, to ensure that they call you.
What do you think about, what are your thoughts on personal branding for attorneys?
Oh, I think it's critical, to be honest. Yeah. I think, I don't know, like, and when you say personal branding, that can go a lot of different ways. Like, my law firm is the Conflict Resolution Center. I very intentionally not used my name because I want my team to be the ones that are doing the cases, but we still spend quite a bit of time on branding and stories. And
Well, so what I mean by personal branding
Yeah.
is like you, right? Chris Guymon,
Yeah.
right? Like as I think as we move into 2025 and 2026 and social currency becomes like a currency,
Yeah.
right? Like the valuation. And I think you're seeing this in NIL players right now, right?
Yeah.
Like there's some websites out there that goes, "Hey, this athlete is worth this much," right?
Yeah.
Based on all of their likeness or whatever. So I'm wondering if that's and I'm seeing that somewhat in the lawyer space, but I'm curious to see how other people, because you have a personal brand,
Yeah.
right? Like you're building your name. I know,
Absolutely.
I know you're building your business with another name, but like I think everything that happens with Chris Guyman feeds into the business,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And when it comes to the personal brand, that's what really makes you irreplaceable. I think especially attorneys that are part of firms should really work on their own personal brand. One of my coaching clients, he is a partner in a big firm, but I mean, and so it's kind of funny because I'm coaching him in these things, and a lot of the stuff he can't do because he has to get his partner's approval and that kind of stuff. But one of the things he can do is all that personal brand, and so he has a YouTube channel where it's him, and he has his own CRM system where people who have followed his, they've downloaded his lead magnets and those types of things, and he has a large following, especially for an attorney, and because of that, he like his law firm can't get rid of him. Like he is a big part of the revenue that they generate, which also allows him to negotiate his salary and his time and those types of things. Because if they're not willing to compensate him, the law firm down the street is, because he brings a
Right.
lot more than just the legal services. And wherever he goes, that following is going to follow him. And so treating yourself as a business, especially in those big firms, is really important.
Did you watch Air yet? The Matt Damon?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's good. But it talked about that, right? Like Michael Jordan, it was the story of Nike and Nike was not even close to being able to capture him, and he was going to go with Adidas, and but his mom, and I'm sure you know the story. You're a basketball guy. He was able to negotiate a percentage of all shoe sales, and that like changed the whole game. So
Yeah.
I wonder that why do you think attorneys aren't working on their personal brands?
I think a lot of it comes down to what we were taught in law school. Law school almost taught you to not be good at business. Like some people say, like, oh, law school didn't prepare you for business. I'm like, no, it was the exact opposite. It taught you to be bad at business. I mean, they teach you the billable hour, which is literally trading time for money. And we all know, anybody who's in business knows that your goal is to stop trading time for money. Um, but a lot of the stuff that they teach in the ethics courses and those types of things are honestly encouraging you to be bad at business, um, and so I just don't think they understand like the value of this kind of stuff, like having a list like that you send emails to and those types of things. You have to do it the right way. You can't, people can't be confused and think there's an attorney client privilege there. But if you do it the right way, it's so valuable. And so I think attorneys, they get scared that they're going to hit an ethics violation or something, and they're just not willing to look into it. And so I mean, my first mentor that I hired, he told me that good lawyers don't market and advertise. Like if you're a good lawyer, like you'll have enough business and they'll just come to you. And that was the worst piece of advice I ever got. The funny thing is he was marketing and advertising all the time. He was always out on the street. He was talking to people. He was doing it, referral based, but he probably spent 20 hours a week networking. So he was marketing and advertising. He just wasn't doing it on Google. And
Traditionally,
so,
right?
yeah, there's a lot of errors when it comes to the legal community for sure.
And that's why you're helping.
Yeah,
That's why you exist.
exactly.
What's the name of your coaching business?
It's Time Freedom for Lawyers, or Time Freedom Lawyers.
Time Freedom Lawyers.
Yeah.
That's very cool. And so how can people work with you?
Yeah. So I want to provide as much value as I can to people for free. And then when they are ready for coaching is when we can do coaching. So if you go to scalingforlawyers.com, it'll take you to a free Facebook group. And we do a free Facebook Live every month. And there's a lot of good conversations about time, money, and energy there. So that's where I tell people, if they're just kind of like looking and want to see what we're about, that's a great way of kind of vetting us a little bit. If you want more help, then there's what's called Attorney Freedom University. It's a school. Like if you've seen School, SKOOL, it's a school platform there, which we are running a promo right now. It's like $97 a month instead of the $297 a month. So a lot of the in-depth trainings are there, as well as a good community of attorneys only. So that's kind of the two introductory things. And if you're looking for a little bit more one-on-one guidance, then we do that as well. And I can give you the link for the application on that kind of stuff.
Very cool. Chris, so much good information. Very, very, very good interview. I appreciate you being here. You guys reach out to him. He's on social media as well, so follow his stuff. If you're an attorney, do you work with non-attorneys?
Yeah, I do. I don't have attorneys join that Attorney Freedom University, or non-attorneys join that Attorney Freedom University. That's exclusively for attorneys. But if you're looking for like one-on-one coaching and scaling your business, I've got some good 12-week packages that can get you going. I did it with an author just the other day, and he like doubled his revenue in 12 weeks. So definitely can if you're looking for it.
I love it. Chris, so good. I really do appreciate it. And I'm gonna be talking to you. So we'll stay in touch for sure.
Awesome. Thank you.
And that was Spaghetti on the Wall, ladies and gentlemen, brought to you by Leduc Entertainment for all of your digital marketing needs, social media, podcasting. We got you, and videos. And you can watch Spaghetti on the Wall anywhere where you are watching it. You're probably watching it right now. So continue listening, continue watching, and we'll see y'all next week.